Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion, learn the truth behind the alcohol myths, and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. Well, hey everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And I have been so fortunate to have a bunch of guests lately, but today I'm going to share a solo episode with you because I want to talk about something that has been circling around in the ethos and has touched on in a couple of the guest episodes that I did recently. And I've really wanted to dial down in this. And so I want to set this up because I'm going to use a word today that I don't normally use in this podcast. And that word is abstinence. But what I want to talk about is the conversation that we're not having around drinking less. So, what happens is we have this well meaning narrative that harm reduction is how we can let go of alcohol, that we can step back how much we're drinking, and that equals our journey, our ticket to freedom, that connects to our journey for alcohol freedom. And unfortunately, that just isn't the case. And so today, I really want to talk about how on the surface this looks like progress, but neuroscience and the addiction science that I learned from Dr. Anna Lembke in the psychology of addiction, all of this shows that alcohol's impact on the brain and the body is non-linear. So even small amounts keep us stuck in this cycle of stress, dopamine dysregulation, neuroinflammation, and altered pain-pleasure balance. And so we have to actually abstain from drinking. This is where that tricky word abstinence comes up. But I want us to embrace abstinence with an open mind today because I want to talk about truly taking a break. And I'm hoping I can help you connect the dots between drinking and drinking less versus drinking and not drinking. We want to really understand the impact alcohol's having on our brain and body, even if we're just drinking once a week or even every 2 weeks. The way that we get hooked into this altered state. And it's a really, really beautiful gift if we can embrace the idea of doing it different, getting out of our own way, forgetting about the so-called fear we might have around forever, and actually see what it feels like to take a sustained break. And for my clients and the work that I do, really 90 days is kind of that threshold. Dr. Anna Lembke won't work with anyone who won't take 30 days off, but 30 days is often just the place where our willpower kind of runs out. And so to really reap the benefits of embracing the beautiful parts of this change and embracing the journey as something that is an empowered choice, I'm going to advocate for 90 days. And so I want to talk about what the science says. I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about dopamine, that pain-pleasure balance, why moderation keeps the brain stuck. I've got a few stats and studies for you. And I want to help you reframe your idea of abstinence, not as deprivation, but as how we actually reset our brain and discover what life really feels like without alcohol's filter. All right. Are you ready to get started? So I want to say that this is, again, a very common place that many coaches will start with their clients. I want to meet you where you're at. And frankly, this is the way that I used to work with clients as well. But like any business, like any personal journey,
my thoughts around this and my approach to this has evolved. And so I really want to talk about the difference between, the narrative that I used to say, I'll meet you where you're at, and we're just going to spend time exploring your ideas. And if you're drinking during this time or you're drinking less, that's all well and good. But I now understand with the nervous system regulation certification I'm currently doing and the work with Dr. Anna Lembke and really digging into the neuroscience that just isn't true. Cutting back isn't the solution. So let's talk first of all about the neuroscience and what's actually happening when we look at the physiology. So we've got this hormone, this neurotransmitter of dopamine. And we understand a little bit that alcohol spikes our dopamine response. And when we stop drinking alcohol, our dopamine levels are going to plummet. But what we also want to understand is that when we're drinking, even occasionally, or drinking less, we are still connected to that pain pleasure balance. Dr. Anna Lembke talks about it like a seesaw, a teeter-totter, right? And she talks about the gremlins that jump on the side of pain. And so we get this heightened pleasure, teeter-totter goes in one direction, and then we get this balance of the gremlins pushing us to the side of pain to try to balance. And when we're in a state where we're actively drinking, doesn't matter again how much, but when we're drinking, we are in that pain pleasure balance and our body is trying to regulate. And remember, when we've been drinking and over drinking for a period of time, 3 years, 4 years, 20 years, 30 years, our tolerance level has changed. And so our set point looks very different. And so cutting back doesn't restore that dopamine sensitivity. It actually, the floor of the pleasure point is still lowered until we stop drinking and allow that dopamine sensitivity to come back, that receptor. That often takes about 90 days. And so we want to know and understand that while we're drinking, even like I said, no matter how much, we're still chasing that pain pleasure balance. Our brain is still in that addiction pathway, and we haven't started the repair work of recovery. We haven't started our brain rebalancing, the hormone set points rebalancing, that tolerance level going away, that pain pleasure pathway resetting. And this is an important part of how we feel better and when we stop drinking. And so, each drink tips that seesaw toward pleasure, and the brain is working to compensate. And so we want to allow our body an opportunity, and particularly our brain, to figure out what life feels like without alcohol. And so when we think about the stress hormones that are created and the cortisol, that stress hormone that is activated in our body when we drink alcohol, we want to remember that alcohol activates the HPA axis. So that's the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It's kind of like the command center of your stress response. So it's like the CEO. And so people who just cut back often still experience the elevated cortisol, which then has that downward spiral of creating more anxiety, creating more triggered responses to wanting to, if we're drinking a little bit, when we feel stressed, we can say, well, this is the time I'm going to have a drink because I'm still drinking occasionally. So all this sets us up for a place where we are really connected to that cycle of drinking and over drinking and the possibility of drinking. And so until we get out of that cycle by not drinking, our stress hormones don't have a way to reset. And abstinence shows measurable improvements in stress reactivity and then also sleep. When we have that heightened cortisol, remember, cortisol is not just for stress, it's also the hormone that wakes us up. It's part of our sleep-wake cycle. Melatonin helps us sleep, cortisol wakes us up. And so we're going to have poor sleep. We're going to have reduced quality of sleep, which can then have its own cascading responses. And so just taking 30 to 90 days off, we start to get back into a normal pattern with our stress hormones, our cortisol, and our sleep. And then this one is really powerful because we talk sometimes about, at least I have, about the inflammation that happens in the lining of the gut. What we forget about is that neuroinflammation, so your brain and your cognitive function. And what we see, there was a study in the National Institute of Health from 2022 that showed that moderate drinkers had reductions in brain volume similar to heavy drinkers. And so even moderate use increases neuroinflammation markers, and cutting back still leaves the brain in that pro-inflammatory state. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want my brain inflamed, not if I can help it. And so this is where the argument or the philosophy that cutting back is really harm reduction. When it comes to the way alcohol's impacting our brain, it's just not true. So the other thing we want to think about is the allostatic load. So this is kind of that difficulty of balancing and trying to get to homeostasis over time. And so repeated alcohol exposure, even drinking less, creates an allostatic load, which is the brain's attempt to adapt to stress. So just a small amounts of drinking are still creating that stress. And this is why people who moderate often report more anxiety and cravings over time. So, in order for our nervous system to reset, the only option is abstinence. We've got to take 90 days or more off in order to see how our body and brain will recover, what it really feels like to go through the ups and downs of that rebalancing, that tolerance, the resetting of our hormones, and see where we land. We cannot do that by drinking, 2 days a week instead of 5. It seems like a good idea, but we're not getting the results we want to. And so I'll just share some statistics for you. So, in a 2018 Lancet study, they concluded that the safest level of drinking is none. And then we also know that when they study REM sleep, just 1 to 2 drinks can reduce REM sleep by up to 20%. And the effect doesn't diminish by drinking less, but only by stopping any alcohol coming into your system. And so that 20%, this is where when we have our REM sleep impacted, we are not able to process hormones, memories, and most importantly, detoxify our brain. This is part of where that neuroinflammation stays active when we're drinking. And so, brain volume, moderate alcohol consumption is associated with reductions in both gray and white matter. And so, it's moderate, even 1 to 2 drinks a day. And then, mental health. So, from the University of Sussex, there was a 2019 dry January study. People who abstain for 30 days or more report 71% in improved sleep, 67% more energy, and 58% weight loss. So, imagine that it's not just drinking less, it's 30, 60, 90, 120 and beyond days. It's powerful to understand the difference between taking a sustained break. And so I just wanted to touch base with you because, again, we often hear that, oh, yeah, I'm only drinking on the weekends. And we want to applaud that and celebrate that. I think it's very powerful to also understand that that isn't going to maybe get us as far as we thought. And that's the part that I wanted to share with you today, because I want to share with you always the new things I'm learning, the new awareness that the science is having, the neuroscience that's now available to show us how our biology, our psychology, and our physiology, and the social connections around drinking, drinking less, or not drinking. So it sounds very cool as an alcohol freedom coach to say, well, hey, do you want to cut back on drinking? But that's not how we're going to get the results we want. So if you are looking to improve your sleep, improve your productivity, get your hormones balanced, show up for the rest of your life with more energy, more joy, more connection, more presence, more connection to yourself, then I want to invite you to stop for a period of time, let's say 90 days. Stop using alcohol and watch what can happen. It's the only way you're going to know if not drinking is going to open all of the doors. And here's the thing, spoiler alert, I believe it will. I believe it will because of the work I've been so fortunate to do with thousands of people just like you and just like me who went from drinking occasionally to drinking a lot to drinking less, maybe drinking a lot again, to finally getting to a place where we took alcohol out of the equation and watched everything else fall into place. Is it easy? Not necessarily, but it can be very simple. And it starts with those 90 or more days alcohol-free. I hope you embrace this with an open mind and just get curious about if maybe some of the narrative out there has it wrong. We want to look at the science. We want to look at the possibilities. And mostly we want to look at your personal goals. How do you want to feel? I believe that no amount of alcohol feels as good as no alcohol at all. All right. Thanks for tuning in today. I've got another couple guests lined up for us. So as always, it's a pleasure to be here with you on the Sober Edge podcast. I love your referrals. Send this episode to a friend if you found it interesting. Take care.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.